Good morning, Mr. Prejudice. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair. By agreement, 3 witnesses have been set down for today. The first is Mr. Zulu. He is represented, and you will hear from his counsel in a minute. The second is Mr. Manyike, and the third possibly won't be called, Mr. Duminy from SMD Motors.
Okay. Thank you. Counsel for Mr. Zulu. They must just sanitize this podium before you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. Just for the record, you can just place yourself on record again.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, my name is Shaun. I'm counsel from Durban and Johannesburg. I'm instructed in this matter by Mr. Miraj of attorneys, Miraj Attorneys. I represent 2 witnesses today. The first, Mr. Duminy. You've heard from my learned friend about Mr. Duminy's evidence. And I represent a witness who I do not wish to obviously disclose for reasons that will become clear as I address Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, just by way of a brief background, you will recall that during the course of last year in August, I, together with my learned friend, Mr. Helens, SC, appeared for a witness. He was given a Section 3.3 notice by the Commission in respect of certain evidence that allegedly implicated him that was to be given by a Mr. Dukwana. Now, Mr. Dukwana, you will recall, Mr. Commissioner, has already given evidence during the course of last year. And as I understand from my learned friend, Mr. Pretorius' address to the Commission yesterday, which I watched, that all of the evidence that is going to be led during the course of this week relates to what is termed the asbestos project in the Free State. The very basis of that evidence that the Commission has at this stage is as a consequence of Mr. Dukwana's evidence. Now, during the course of last year, when I did appear, we put before the Commission an affidavit from my client. We raised in that affidavit certain issues we have with Mr. Dukwana leading evidence on a certain aspect. It was a spreadsheet, if you recall. I won't go into any further detail, but I think you do recall. And you've seen the affidavit in any event.
Yes, yeah.
And we raised the issue about, well, we raised 2 issues.
I'm sorry, don't speak too far away from the mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you are too far away, I can't hear.
I apologize,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, you will recall that we raised 2 issues in the affidavit. We said, firstly, that before our client is called in a very public forum such as this one, on TV, and before his reputation in any way is tarnished or dragged through the mud, so to speak, we would like 2 things. One is we would like the Commission to properly investigate the allegations in Mr. Dukwana's affidavit, and we would also like the Commission to consider that we'd like to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana. Now, we specifically in our affidavit, if you recall, tendered full cooperation to the Commission. We tendered our documents, bank statements, whatever the Commission required. But we specifically said in the affidavit that before we are called into a very public forum, please, given the importance of the Commission and its responsibilities, to investigate these allegations and to please give us an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana. Anyway, that affidavit, and you recall, that affidavit was given to the Commission during August last year. Mr. Helens and I then appeared, I think it was the 27th of August, there's a transcript in respect of that, where various things were raised, and Mr. Commissioner then, after considering all of the um, issues raised, then decided that it is prudent for the Commission to properly investigate and thereafter to make a determination on calling calling the witness. What happened then was two things. Firstly, in regard to the investigations, we cooperated. In regard to the issue of the cross-examination, that was on the Commission's own letter held in abeyance. And at this stage, if I may, just make reference to the further affidavit delivered by my client, which I think is before Mr. Commissioner.
I don't know whether the bundle you have is the same.
It's probably not, but
Yeah,
I'm
yes.
specifically referring to its annexure TWZ 2.1.
The first affidavit of.
And I, for the sake of convenience, I can just ask my attorney to give me a copy of the letter,
Yes.
and
It may
I
be
can
that
then
if
I
you-
can then hand up my
Oh,
copy of my
okay.
letter.
Yes,
please.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes,
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, can I just get
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I apologize for that.
Yes.
If one looks at this letter, this is a letter addressed by the Commission itself. It's by the Secretary of the Commission, Mr. Shabalala. And it makes reference to the initial statement the initial affidavit that my client put up last year. And it confirms receipt of the affidavit. It notes what is stated in paragraph 7.2 and 11. That is the unequivocal tender by my client to cooperate with the Commission's investigations, to make any documents available, including bank statements, to make himself available for an interview, to make himself available to answer any questions. And then it says, in view of those undertakings on the following page, the Commission's investigators will conclude its existing investigations and revert to you. In this regard, they will make contact with you in order to interview you with and obtain the relevant documentation. But most importantly, it says in paragraph 4, consequently, your client's application will be held in abeyance pending finalization of our investigations. That's the reference to the application to cross-examine Mr.
yes.
Dukwana. Now,
Unfortunately, the letter doesn't give a reference so that one could see who within the Commission prepared it. Of course, it's signed by the Acting Secretary, but she signs a lot of letters that come from different work streams and different units of the Commission. I would have liked it if there was an indication as to the reference. But I suspect, looking at the letter, that it may have been prepared by somebody within the legal team who may have been involved in the Dukwana, in the Free State asbestos matter. But the letter doesn't give an indication there. But I think continue to make the point you wanted to make.
Just on that issue,
Yes.
if I may,
Yes.
you will recall that it wasn't my learned friend, Mr. Pretorius, that was
Yeah,
leading the
no.
evidence last year.
Yeah,
It was
no.
Advocate Mukwena
Yes,
that was leading the evidence.
Yes, yes.
So it could very.
Yeah.
I'm speculating, but it could very well be.
I think by 13th December he was no longer involved in the commission, so it may
see.
be other members of the legal team who were involved,
Yes.
or somebody
Yes.
who was involved.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that's fine. That doesn't necessarily say anything about the point you want to raise.
Yes.
Your point is you received, your client's attorneys received a letter from the commission, and this is what it was saying.
Indeed, and that was in December last year.
Yes, yes.
And then you will recall we have put in, as I've said, 2 affidavits. But what happened then after December is eventually Mr. Lambrechts, Etienne Lambrechts from the Commission came back and communicated directly with my client and so on, and subpoenaed documents from a bank. And when we in fact had already said, look, we're cooperating, there's no need to do that. But be that as it may, I just want to raise the issue of not just the conduct of some of the representatives of the Commission, and I say that with all humility and respect, but with an equal amount of strength, that my client has been treated rather shabbily and unfairly. For one, when he made this tender as far back as August last year, the tender was not in fact taken up. In fact, what happened then was there were subpoenas issued for bank statements and so on. There was a threat that he's going to be summoned before the Commission. There was a stage where there was direct communication with the client instead of my instructing attorney, knowing full well that my attorney is on record. There was somewhat of harassment as to my client being forced to disclose his whereabouts for certain things to be served on him. This is all dealt with in the further affidavit. I need not...
I've seen it.
Yes, I think you have seen it.
I've seen it, yeah.
But the point of my address is simply this, at this stage. Other than the manner in which my client was treated, it appears that there is a procedural...
Maybe I must just say
Sorry.
this before you move away from your client's complaints about how he has been treated. I do understand that there will be an affidavit that responds to the allegations of how your client has been treated, because I would like to see a response to the allegations. So I can't say much now, but I've read what the allegations are, and I understand that at some stage there will be an affidavit that I will look at to see what the response is.
Okay.
And then I can only say something once I've seen that.
Yes, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
Mr. Commissioner. That aside, there would also need to be a response in respect of our application to cross-examine. And at this stage, may I just refer firstly to the affidavit of my client, the first affidavit in August last year, and I think you have that before you.
Well, I know I've got no less than 2 affidavits of your client.
It's the first affidavit.
Is it the one that's 7 pages?
That's right. And
Or
that,
you mean the first to
the
be provided to the commission?
Indeed, and that
Nothing.
affidavit is in fact attached to the further affidavit as well, as a matter of convenience.
Well, Mr. Pretorius has got the same bundle as myself. He might be able to tell me where I find it in the bundle.
Bundle 1,
150. That is bundle FS1, page 150, and 150 refers to the black numbers, eh?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay. Yes, I've got it.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah.
Commissioner, if you, firstly you would look at paragraph 7, and obviously our page numbers are different, so I apologize, I can't tell you which
Well,
page, but
my
it's paragraph 7.
My paragraph 7 starts with, I wish to make
That's
a
the one.
number of, is that the one? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So just bearing in mind the background that Mr. Dukwana is, if I may term it, the Commission's star witness on the asbestos eradication project in the Free State. So bearing that in mind, this is what my client said. He said, firstly, he wants to make a few things, he wants to make a few points, and he says, in regard to the statement, or with regard to the statement of Mr. Dukwana, any responsible, legally trained person who has regard to the statement to which I'm referred would be reckless and indeed, would be reckless if they did not conclude that the statement comprises an undirected, rambling gossip sheet. There appears to be no substantiation whatsoever for the allegations loosely made by the deponent. And then he says the following, if you could please go, Mr. Commissioner, to paragraph 7.4, or 7.3, rather. He says, I would remind the Commission that it has to go about its work in a responsible manner and that it is positively under a legal duty to avoid unsubstantiated allegations from being publicly aired with the consequent damning consequences. In my case, they will be serious indeed. And then he says, I insist on a right to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana in paragraph 7.
Is that what he regards as an application for leave to cross-examine?
Yes. And
that
he
one
go-
sentence.
And, well,
And he doesn't have a right.
Mr. Commissioner,
He
can
only
I?
has a right to apply,
Yes. Can I?
not a right to cross-examine.
Can I make 2 points on that score? You have a discretion, and I've read your rulings. You have a discretion. The test is well set out in your rulings. There's no right to cross-examine. But my point is, our application has not even yet been considered.
Yes, but if you rely on this sentence to say there is an application for leave to cross-examine, I think you probably will have difficulty.
Well,
Because he's not applying here for leave. He's just stating what he believes, what right he believes he has. What he does indicate is that, to say the least, he has an intention
yes.
to cross-examine,
Well,
probably that part. But on the face of it, it would seem to me that if this is what is relied on, he possibly still needs to make a proper application for leave to cross-examine.
That may very well be, and I take your point. But just bear in mind that as far as the Commission is concerned, they recognized this as an application to cross-examine because they said to us in December, well, when I say they, I apologize, I mean the letter. The letter said to us in December, written on behalf of the Commission, that your application will be held in abeyance. And it seems that they recognized two things. They recognized our tender to cooperate, which is clearly set out in the letter, and they recognized our application to cross-examine, and they said it will be held in abeyance. But even if we have to bring a fresh application, and Mr. Commissioner is of the view that this does not suffice as an application, my point is that that still has to be decided. As far as we were aware, the Commission recognized it as an application to cross-examine. We now learned for the first time today, in fact this morning, that it's not recognized as an application to cross-examine, but that I'm not making much of that at this stage. It's something that we have to deal with. But more importantly, it's something that the Commission procedurally has to deal with. Because if indeed we are given a leave by Mr. Commissioner to cross-examine, then Firstly, our application itself would have to be determined. Mr. Commissioner would have to apply your mind to that application, and then it's yes or no, depending on how Mr. Commissioner views it. Thereafter, we either cross-examine or we don't. But at this stage, it's premature to even go into the application when, on the Commission's version, that application in any event is in abeyance and obviously has not been decided as yet. So we say, with all due respect, that's yet a further prejudicial aspect to my client. That causes serious prejudice with respect, because now we have a situation where initially the Commission says to us last year, here is a Section 3.3 notice in respect of Mr. Dukwana's evidence. We come along and we say to the Commission, we have difficulties with Mr. Dukwana's evidence for the reasons set out in our affidavit. We'd like to cross-examine him.
Well, let's start where probably we should have started, namely what the point of your address is. I think the point of your address is that you are applying for the postponement of the hearing of your client's evidence. Is that right?
Mr. Commissioner,
Or
yes. Simply put, I'm saying that procedurally we have a right to certain things, including having our application to cross-examine decided before our client or my client is put into the witness box and is asked questions surrounding this asbestos project in the Free State. And we say that the very evidence or basis that the Commission is now proceeding this week to ask these questions, and this much is clear from Mr. Pretorius' address yesterday, is Mr. Dukwana's evidence on what the Commission heard last year on the asbestos
Yes,
audit.
but I just want us to be on the same page.
Yes.
Is the purpose of address to apply for the postponement of the hearing of your client's evidence?
Yes.
Yes. And the basis for that application is that he seeks to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana, and he believed that he had filed an application for leave to cross-examine him. He was told that that application would be held in abeyance. He believes that he should that application should be decided first before he gives evidence and gets questioned. That's the basis. That's right.
You have the essence of my submission.
Yes. Now, I think that in part, your application is based on a certain sequence of events, one of which is that your client believes if he is going to be granted leave to cross-examine, he should cross-examine Mr. Dukwana first before he can give evidence. Is that right? Obviously, if his application is unsuccessful, he would say, okay, I'll go into the witness stand and testify. Is that correct?
Mr. Commissioner, I think there are two aspects to that. Before he even gets to the point of the cross-examination, he would like his application decided.
Yes, no, but that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
I'm saying, first, he says he believes he has a pending application for leave to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana.
Yes.
He believes that should be decided first.
Yes.
Before he can be called to give evidence and to be questioned.
Yes.
And if his application is decided first, obviously it can be that it's granted or it's refused.
Yes.
If it is granted, he would further say he must first cross-examine Mr. Dukwana before he takes the witness stand. If his application for leave to cross-examine Dukwana is unsuccessful, I take it he would say, okay, then in that event, I would take the witness stand.
Well, yes, but I think I'd like to just make one point to add to that, if I may. Remember, he came last year, my client came along last year to the Commission and said, these are the issues I have with Mr. Dukwana's evidence. These can I cross-examine him? The Commission then said to us in December, we recognize implicitly in that letter, we recognize your application to cross-examine. It's in abeyance. So he, procedurally with respect, his application for cross-examine is still in abeyance in respect of a witness that I'm given to understand has already given evidence at length about the asbestos project. So the point is that he'd like his application, he'd like Mr. Commissioner to apply mind to the application first before he is compelled into the witness box in a very public forum to be questioned about issues surrounding the asbestos project.
Well, my recollection from even last year is that your client's concern was largely revolved around a certain amount of money that was reflected in the spreadsheet as having been given or intended to be given to somebody with certain initials. I'm not sure if there was any other concern at that stage that he raised.
Well, he couldn't raise any other concern at that stage
Yes.
because Mr. Dukwana had not yet given evidence. Mr.
Yeah.
Dukwana had given an affidavit, and
Yeah.
as is the customary practice with the
Yeah.
Commission, Mr. Commissioner then sends out a
Yes.
Section 3.3
Yes.
a notice to say you are possibly implicated.
Yeah.
This is the evidence that you're implicated in or allegedly implicated in. You now have rights. You can seek to cross-examine, you can come and give evidence, so you can send someone on your behalf to give evidence. So we hadn't at that stage heard any of Mr. Dukwana's evidence.
Yes.
Then Mr. Dukwana, after we came along on the 27th of August, and Mr. Commissioner found that that aspect should not be dealt with at all and so on, and we left the Commission at that stage, Mr. Dukwana then gave evidence at length, as I'm given to understand from the transcripts, about the Free State asbestos audit. So just bearing in mind at that stage, that's what we were asked to deal with. It could very well be a case at the stage when we either have to bring a fresh application, call it, to cross-examine or supplement our application to cross-examine. It may be other aspects that we require to
But
cross-examine.
as you stand there, is the position that for all intents and purposes, as far as you know, your client's concern arises from Mr. Dukwana's evidence in relation to what was in the spreadsheet?
Mr. Commissioner, if I may, can I just ask you, before I answer that question, because the answer to that question is no, that's not my only concern.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think I need to tell you why. And if you look, for example, at the further affidavit of of my client, and that appears. I'm sorry, I don't have the page number, but it's the further
Yes,
affidavit.
yeah.
But attached to that affidavit appears the questions that were put to my client by the Commission's investigators.
Yeah.
And that is Annexure TWZ8.
Yes. Is that the one relating to the car?
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner.
Is what you are talking about allegations about a car?
It's not just, no, it's not just the car.
Okay.
If, for example, if one looks at this document, can I perhaps just point you to?
Yeah.
So the document is dated the 14th of May 2020. It's from the Commission. This time it is signed by sorry, it's not signed by anyone, but I think it's clearly a document from the Commission because it was a letter saying these are the questions we'd like you to answer, and then we answered the questions. But the questions revolved around some of the questions revolved around the following. It referred firstly to the signed affidavit of the signed affidavit of my client, dated the 23rd of August. It asked questions about whether that is a document signed by him. It then asked questions about Mr. Dukwa's spelling of his name and so on. It then asked questions about the spreadsheet in paragraph 2.4 that Mr. Dukwa made reference to in his affidavit. And it then asked various other questions about companies and parties such as Blackhead and so on, which are issues that we've addressed completely in the letter. But the point I'm trying to make is that the questions that were asked revolved around Mr. Dukwa's evidence. Those were the questions that were asked by the Commission, and those were the answers we gave. And that's what the Commission wants us to deal with today, by getting into the witness box to deal with. And I say
Yes,
with all
but from what I've read, it seems to me that your client is ready to deal with any of these allegations. From what I've read, the impression I have is that he's ready to deal with all of these allegations. It may well be that he would prefer to cross-examine Dukwa before he takes the witness stand. But when I read all these affidavits, I certainly get the impression of somebody who is ready to say, bring them on, I will answer this, I'll deal with all of this. That's the impression I get. It may be a wrong impression, but that's the impression I get.
Can I perhaps correct that impression, if I may?
Yeah.
He answered those questions because of the conduct of the Commission's investigators.
Yeah.
And I can take you through the affidavit, but he answered those questions under pain of the possibility of subpoenas and being summoned to the Commission and being asked about his whereabouts. And he answered those, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but and he answered those questions consistent with his tender that he originally made last year to say, please, interview me, ask me these questions, don't subpoena my bank accounts, don't embarrass me.
Yes.
I'm cooperating.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. I think I understand your application. Unless there is something else you want to say, I would like to hear what Mr. Prejudice has to say. As we speak, my concern is that if the witness has had enough time to deal with the issues and has put in the necessary statements or affidavits, it may be that it's not something that should warrant postponing his evidence, that he might prefer to cross-examine a witness before he gives evidence. Number two, there is the problem that, as I indicate, on the face of it for me, if reliance is placed simply on that one sentence, the way he says, I insist on my right to cross-examine, that if reliance is based on that to say there's a pending application, there might be difficulty with that. I accept that you received, or he received, a letter from the Commission which seemed to think that was an application for leave to cross-examine. But I'll hear what Mr. Prejudice has to say. Those are my current thoughts, to say there might be difficulty with that. But Certainly, to the extent that there might be doubt about whether that's an application for leave to cross-examine, if he decides he does want to file an application or file documents or affidavits that will make it quite clear he's applying for leave to cross-examine. That could still be done. He might have to file a condonation application to the extent that it might be outside the time limit, but there is no bar that he can't do it anymore. He can explain the position. And it may well be that if he gives evidence, by the time he finishes, even he is satisfied that I've dealt sufficiently with whatever Mr. Dugwana said. I think I don't think I should bother about cross-examining him anymore. But also, it might emerge that there is very little in terms of disputes of fact. Remember that with regard to Mr. Dugwana and the amounts of money which were reflected in the spreadsheet, remember that he was simply interpreting what he was seeing there, and there, in regard to your client, there were just certain initials, there was a certain amount. He didn't know anything, as far as I recall, beyond that, and except knowing various of government officials who had something to do with the asbestos project. That as far as I recall, that's about all that I think he was saying. You know, he could not be definitive about anything.
Sorry, can I just address you very briefly on that? When, firstly, I think it must be borne in mind that this is a very public forum, Mr. Commissioner. As we stand here, we're being televised to the country, around the country. When one has to get into a witness box in this kind of forum, which is as public as this is, one obviously has certain rights that need to be protected. Now, if Mr. Commissioner is of the view that you can carry on with the evidence and there really is no prejudice at the end of the day, I ask Mr. Commissioner just to bear this in mind. The prejudice is extreme, because if my client, who has cooperated with the Commission at all material times and has answered their questions, both by way of written answers and in terms of 2 affidavits now, and he's then, for the sake of it, just called into the witness box to be publicized.
No, I'm sure he's not being called for the sake of it.
Well, that's my point, is that really is what it's coming down to.
No, I don't think it's coming down to that.
Well, I say this to you with all due respect then, just bear in mind that it is a public forum. And there is a responsibility that the Commission has in not only finding a balance between what must be done correctly in terms of the Constitution's purposes, but in respect of witnesses' integrity and reputation. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm not asking Mr. Commissioner to stop this commission dead in its tracks while I go ahead and bring my application to cross-examine. There are other witnesses that are going to be giving evidence over the next few days, as I understand. Commission can carry on with its work. But the point I'm trying to make is this. When Mr. Commissioner says that, well, we can deal with the issue of the cross-examination later, and later it might actually transpire that we don't even want to cross-examine, I ask Mr. Commissioner to just bear this in mind, that the very basis of the Commission's allegations in respect of the asbestos audit arise from the evidence of Mr. Dugwana. When it comes to my client, that's why he's being called as a witness, that's why he's being asked questions. To not give him an opportunity, firstly, for an application to cross-examine Mr. Dugwana to be decided, and then if that is decided in his favor, for him to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana is extremely prejudicial to my client.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner, can I just
Yes,
take
okay, you
an
take
instruction just to
instructions,
make
yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
there's nothing further?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, I just,
Yes.
my instructing attorney just reminds me to raise this point, and that when Mr. Commissioner says that my client can give evidence before Mr. Dukwana is cross-examined, and then can decide later whether he wants to cross-examine him and so on, just bear in mind that what then Mr. Commissioner is permitting is for Mr. Dukwana's untested evidence to stand, and for my client then to give evidence, and then at some later stage to be given firstly an application, firstly an opportunity to have his application decided to cross-examine and test that witness, and then possibly test that witness under cross-examination, which is a bit like putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, because as much as you say, well, my client can come and give evidence and then decide at a later stage whether to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana or not, it works the other way as well, and that my client may want to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana first and then decide. Indeed, the commission may then decide, well, there's no need to call my client,
Well,
because in fact, there's no evidence that, that he needs to deal with.
well, remember that you could remember that it would be permissible to have a situation where a witness has implicated you and you give evidence without cross-examining that witness. And it would happen where your application for leave to cross-examine has been refused, and properly so. So the whole thing does not exclude, the whole scheme does not exclude that happening.
Yes.
So you could have a situation where you have to come and give evidence without cross-examining the witness who has implicated you. So from that point of view, assuming you are correct about saying Mr. Dukwana's evidence would stand, then in that way it stands. By the time you come and give your evidence, you have not cross-examined.
Indeed, but that's speculation, because at the end of the day, until...
No, I'm talking about the principle.
Yes,
In law,
yes,
within the context of a commission, where there is no right to cross-examine,
yes,
but you have to apply for leave to cross-examine.
indeed, yes,
Some applications will be granted,
yes,
others will be refused.
yes.
So the point you made was simply that if your client gives evidence without Mr. Dukwana being cross-examined, he would be giving evidence in circumstances where Mr. Dukwana's evidence has not been tested. And I'm simply saying, legally, within this context, that can happen.
Mr. Commissioner, I take your point, and it can happen, but my point is not just that. My point was his application to cross-examine has not even yet been decided. And that's where I find, with respect, the procedural
Yes.
the procedural irregularity, because if it, I've conceded that you don't have to give him the leave to cross-examine. You have a discretion. There's a test, and you exercise that discretion judicially. But even before you've exercised that discretion and applied your mind, that application has to be decided, which is presently being held in abeyance on the Commission's own version, and it hasn't yet been decided. So it could be a case, yes, that you give us leave to cross-examine or not, but you haven't even decided that yet, with respect. And that, I think, is the complaint.
Yeah, well, of course, it's unfortunate that there's to be an argument whether there's an application for leave to cross-examine,
Yes.
but we all know that what you rely on in terms of the affidavit and what you rely on in terms of the Commission's letter
Yes, Mr.
of December 13.
Mr. Commissioner, I must tell you this.
Yes.
If I had known that the Commission's approach
Yes.
was that there's no application, I would
Yes.
have obviously
Yes.
brought an application. But
Yes.
I was under the impression,
Yes.
particularly in light of the letter of December,
Yes.
until this morning,
Yes.
that there was an application to cross-examine.
Yes.
And it's
Okay.
being held in abeyance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Prejudice?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we take issue with the current application, whatever its implications are, on two fundamental bases. Firstly, Mr. Dukwana is not the star witness before the Commission in relation to these issues. Nothing that will be put to Mr. Zulu, hopefully today, will deal with the evidence that Mr. Dukwana gave. It is true that he put up a spreadsheet, a cost of business schedule. He did it as a whistleblower. He could not testify to its authenticity, and he gave evidence of a largely speculative and hearsay nature. That the legal team and the Commission's investigators have put aside entirely. They have made their own investigations. They have done their own work. And it's at those investigations and that work that has already been put to Mr. Zulu in the questions, and it's that investigation and the products of that investigation that we will deal with in questioning, hopefully today. So there's an entire break between what Mr. Dukwana said on the one hand and what we are dealing with today with Mr. Zulu. The cost of business schedule, by way of example, has been put to witnesses and has been authenticated, as was said in my opening address. You will recall in my opening address, not one part of that opening address refers to the evidence of Mr. Dukwana. So the idea that Mr. Dukwana must be cross-examined on the basis that he cannot deal with the authenticity of the schedule is entirely collateral to the issues that will be dealt with. The issues that will be dealt with today with Mr. Zulu are entirely based on investigations that happened after Mr. Dukwana. Mr. Dukwana could be criticized. He could be dealt with on the basis that he didn't know what he was doing when he put up the 10-6, that he was speculative. It's not going to assist you, Chair, to reach the decisions that you must reach about this matter. You will have to evaluate investigations, what witnesses say about those investigations, and a host of documentary evidence. There's no link between what is going to happen today except a historical fact. Chair, the questions today will deal with, firstly, Mr. Zulu's participation or facilitation of the asbestos project in the procurement process. Mr. Dukwana is entirely unhelpful in that respect and gave no evidence in that respect. The second is Mr. Zulu's participation or facilitation of adjustments to the provincial budget, something that Mr. Dukwana cannot help at all. No cross-examination is going to assist in that. And the third is we will deal with two payments, not any allegation that appears on the cost of business schedule, but the product of investigation with the motor car dealer in Pietermaritzburg, and two payments, one of 1 million rand and one of 600,000 rand. Again, entirely unrelated to anything that Mr. Dukwana says, but I'm happy, Chair, to give you and my learned friend an undertaking that I'm not going to deal with anything that Mr. Dukwana says. It will be entirely documents obtained through the investigation and evidence obtained in regard to the spreadsheet from other witnesses. In fact, Chair, the cost of business schedule, I don't intend to deal with Mr. Zulu at all. I'm dealing with entirely different evidence in that regard. That's the first issue in respect of which...
and that,
we will
of course, it seems, would make... that, of course, it seems would suggest that there would be hardly any justification to postpone the hearing of Mr. Zulu's evidence today, just so that he can cross-examine somebody who gave evidence on something that he's not going to be questioned about today.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And in fact, it doesn't take much speculation. One can look at the allegations made by Mr. Zulu in both his affidavits. He says, in essence, in relation to Mr. Dukwane's evidence, you've put up something to which you cannot testify at all. It's entire speculation. This document, if it's a real document at all, can't be put by you before the commission. So Mr. Dukwane admits that, or he doesn't admit it and he denies it. How does that help you, Chair, when the test of the authenticity of that document, which I'm not going to deal with today, in any event, I'm going to deal with entirely the fruits of investigations on an entirely different basis. What does it help? Chair, you will say, Mr. Dukwane, you based your evidence on entirely a hearsay document. You couldn't justify it. You couldn't talk to its authenticity. And that's the end of it. But in any event, Chair, I've made it clear the issues that will be dealt with today have all been put to Mr. Zulu. He's put it on affidavit. Now, when he answered those questions on affidavit, or as an annexure to an affidavit, he didn't say, I can't deal with these issues. He's given evidence. That evidence is on affidavit. He has not said, I can only do this when I need to cross-examine. That leads to the second point, Chair. We cannot have a situation in this Commission. The Commission is under tremendous pressure. It must deal with its matters. You, Chair, with the discretion that you have, subject to elements of fairness, of course, you, Chair, will decide what the sequence of events will be, when witnesses will come, what issues they will deal with. That's within your discretion. You have an onerous task. It must be completed by December, by all accounts. So it doesn't help the progress of this Commission for witnesses to tell you, in effect, how you should run the Commission. Chair, if I could just, for your assistance, please, deal with the formal way to deal with this matter is perhaps not the best way to deal with the matter, but it is significant. Rule 3.4 makes it very clear that if you want to cross-examine, you must do so in a particular way. That read with Rule 11.3 says any application must follow a particular format. It must be a proper motivation and a proper application in terms of the rules. A line in an affidavit doesn't suffice. The fact that there was an incorrect statement in a letter doesn't elevate that application to a proper application. It doesn't do so at all. The fact remains there has been no application to cross-examine in terms of the rules. But there are other ways to deal with it rather than that formalistic approach, and I've given that to you. If I may just assist you, Chair, by giving you the references to the relevant documents. On the 23rd of August 2019, in Mr. Zulu's first affidavit, he said, I insist on my right to cross-examine, not accompanied by any application. That's in FS1, page 153, paragraph 7.4. Then on the 28th of July 2020, in his second affidavit, Mr. Dukwane says, not Mr. Dukwane, my apologies, Mr. Zulu says, in his own words, I reserved the right to cross-examine. And then he says later on in the affidavit, and this is at FS1 page 162, my request to cross-examine Mr. Dekwana has gone unanswered. And then on the 13th of December 29, the State Capture Commission said, the Secretary said, your client's application will be held in abeyance. Now that is an unfortunate statement, Chair. There's no getting away from it. But it doesn't excuse an application that must be made in terms of the Rules 3.4 read with 11.3. That duty remains. And in the Rule 3.3 notice, the person implicated's attention is pertinently drawn to how, or in terms of what rules applications must be made. Then, Chair, on the 28th of July 2020, when the second affidavit was put up by Mr. Zulu, there was an agreement to appear on 6 August 2020. It was an unconditional agreement. On that basis, today has been set aside for Mr. Zulu. And it, or at least a large part of today. That was unconditional. There was no statement there, but we first want to cross-examine. This is something, it may be, that just seeks to avoid what is the inevitable consequence of having to answer questions before you, Chair. In relation to complaints as to how Mr. Zulu has been treated, in the course of the last week, I only came into this matter 2 weeks ago, Chair. In the course of the last 2 weeks, I've asked for a full response to be prepared. That has been prepared. It's part of the bundle, and we can give it to. But that, however important it may be to Mr. Zulu, and however important it may be to the Commission, Chair, does not go to the central issue of today's proceedings, and those are the 3 areas that need to be covered. The second point is that Mr. Zulu is not being taken by surprise. He knows what issues are going to be dealt with. He has been presented with 10 documents that he has been given an opportunity to consider and consult with his lawyers. So his agreement to appear on 6 August 2020 is understandable in that context. I must say that the correspondence between the parties is quite cordial and polite and constructive. What is not, in our view, very constructive is the tone and content of the various affidavits, but that can be dealt with in due course. The formal point I've made, two more points, Chair. This is not an adversarial process. It is not a trial where you allow one side to win and one side to lose. Mr. Zulu is not here in a contest against Mr. Dekwana or anyone else for that matter, which can be won or lost. The formal rules of court proceedings don't apply in a commission. You, Chair, will decide it in a manner that best assists you to make findings in relation to your terms of reference. And that requires both a procedural set of considerations as well as a substantive set of considerations. And the answer is, what is going to assist you, Chair, to get to the bottom of the allegations today and to allow the witness to answer and ventilate his answers to the product of the investigations that have taken place on those 3 issues. Those are our submissions, Chair. We must proceed.
Thank you. And any reply, counsel, for Mr. Zulu? Thank you, Mr. Prejudice. They'll sanitize the podium before counsel for Mr. Zulu goes there.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
So from what I gather from my learned friend's address to Mr. Commissioner, he is going to be leading then evidence only in relation to what he stated by Mr. Duminy, as I understand it, in his affidavit. And I say that because Mr.
Well, he says, let's say what he says. He says he will not be questioning Mr. Zulu on the basis of what Mr. Dugwana may have said. He will be questioning him on the basis of the product of the investigation of the commission subsequent to Mr. Zulu having brought to the attention of the commission certain things. And he says it's not going to be helpful for Mr. Zulu to really cross-examine Mr. Dugwana for purposes of today, because he would be questioned on the basis of the product of the investigation conducted by the commission. Yeah, that's
Sorry.
what he says.
Mr. Commissioner, as I understood him, he said that he's going to be asking my client questions relating to certain payments that were made to a motor car dealership in Pietermaritzburg.
Well, that includes that, I
Yes.
think, but I don't know if it, if you want to, if you
Well,
should make it the only thing. He
Can I-
says it's the product of the investigation of the commission, and it's not really so much about what Mr. Zulu may have said, Mr. Dugwana may have said about Mr. Zulu.
Yes, the point I'm just trying to understand here is if there's not going to be any questions at all about Mr. Dugwana, then the questions that my learned friend wished to put, firstly, I just remind the Commission that my client received another section, excuse me, section 3.3 notice in respect of allegations made by Mr. Duminy. And he received a separate section 3.3 notice in respect of certain allegations made by Mr. Mohesi. In his affidavit before the Commission, he says, I take no issue with those affidavits. I've received the section 3.3 notice. Those allegations made in those affidavits don't implicate. So he doesn't want to give any evidence. He doesn't need to give any evidence on that. That evidence is already there.
Well, if he has no issue with it, that he will say that he can say that if he's asked anything about it, he can say, I've already said, I don't dispute what they say.
Yes.
That's it.
The point I'm just trying to make is that this is the Commission's procedure. We were given 3.3 notices to say we are possibly implicated persons in respect of allegations made in 2 affidavits. And we said, in his affidavit, he says, I don't have a problem. Nothing in those affidavits implicate me. So I just want to draw that to your attention.
Yeah, okay.
So whether or not there's evidence that is actually required by my client is a question that obviously the Commission needs to determine. Because if there's not going to be any questions revolving around the evidence of Mr. Dugwana, then what we're left with really is the evidence of Mohesi and Duminy, and my client has already said he takes no issue with that. That's my first point. My second point is my learned friend says that, well, there was an agreement for my client to appear here today. Well, that's not entirely correct. As much as there was an agreement to appear, that agreement has a background. The background is that my client was being threatened with a summons to appear today, irrespective of what has happened before and what we've said in the affidavits before. So, hands tied, so to speak, here he is, because otherwise he would have been summoned. He doesn't want to disrespect the Commission, and he certainly doesn't want to run foul of the law, so he's here. That's the point. It's not simply a case of, well, we are here because we're happy and we agreed to it.
It may well be that to the extent that your client may have already, at the date, I think Mr. Pierre said the date was 28 July, if at the time he had already received a summons, and I don't know if he received a summons or just a notice, but it may be that within the context of a summons, it would have been expected that if your client was or believed that he should be allowed to cross-examine first, cross-examine Mr. Dugwana, that he would say, because I've been issued with a summons, I will appear there, but I want you to know that I will appear, but I will still argue that before I give evidence, I should be given a chance to cross-examine Dugwana. I don't know whether that's what he means in that context.
No.
But it just seems to me that if, for purposes of today, what Mr. Dugwana said plays no role at all, or plays a minimal role, that there is no reason why we should not continue and Mr. Zulu should give evidence. That's that, because your entire application for a postponement was really based on saying he's now going to be asked about Mr. Dugwana's evidence. And Mr. Prejudice says, but that's not what's going to happen.
Mr. Commissioner, firstly on the issue of the summons, it's dealt with in the further affidavit from paragraph 31 onwards, yes, where on the 21st of July, Mr. Lambrechts said that he has been instructed to prepare a summons for my client.
Okay.
Now, this after there's already been correspondence between the attorney, there's an advocate Rengata at the commission, my attorney corresponded with her, with Lambrechts to say we are willing to cooperate. At all material times we've been willing to cooperate. Despite that, there was then the email from Lambrechts saying he's now instructed to prepare a summons for my client.
Well, I can tell you this about being instructed to issue a summons. We have recently been experiencing a lot of difficulties. For a long time, from 2018 and last year, we mostly simply requested people to appear without issuing a summons. It did happen with regard to certain people. And the approach was informed by, or the approach was, if people are cooperating, there is no need for a summons, okay? But of late, there have been certain challenges, and the fact that we have a very serious time constraint. So recently, I was even saying, I think it was in an open hearing, maybe the Commission should issue summons against everybody, irrespective whether you are cooperating or not, because sometimes somebody is cooperating and then something comes up, and because there is no compulsion, it's easy to then change. Whereas if there is a compulsion, then you know you can't change. So there are certain challenges. It might not reflect on a particular individual if a summons is issued. It might be that if we want to make sure that we minimize the prospects of our time not being used properly, yes, the best thing is to issue a summons, and if you receive a summons, don't feel bad don't think that the Commission thinks I'm not cooperating, yes, but sometimes the summons even protects you when somebody else, maybe your superior at work, might say, hey, no, something else has come up now, so you can say, there's a summons, I have to go there. Whereas if there's no compulsion, you might be prevailed upon to not come. So, but I'm just mentioning that to give the context. But I think coming back to your application, as we speak, my inclination would be to dismiss it because it was based on Dugwana, and Mr. Prejudice says the evidence or the questioning really will not be based on Dugwana.
Mr. Commissioner?
You may still have another point. I'm saying that's my inclination.
Yes.
If you have another point,
yes,
or you can still put it. Yeah.
Sorry, I appreciate fully the issue of the summons. I'm just putting in context this agreement that it was as a result of this threat of the issue of the summons.
Okay.
And I fully appreciate that the importance of the work of the Commission and the necessity to summons witnesses. But in this context, when my learned friend says, well, we agreed to be here today because despite us cooperating and saying we'll be here today, there was a threat of a summons.
Yeah.
That's the only point there. Mr. Commissioner, on this issue of it is based only the application for the adjournment to deal with the issue of cross-examination is based only on the evidence of Dukwana. I just have this to remind Mr. Commissioner about. As I understand my learned friend's address from yesterday, all the evidence that the Commission is dealing with this week, or from yesterday, or today, tomorrow, whatever the case is, including the evidence from my client, is evidence in respect of the asbestos audit in the Free State. It's not evidence about anything else. It's not evidence about general aspects of issues. It's related specifically to that audit. Now, if one, without me going into the details of the questions which appear in TWZ 28, TWZ 8 to the papers, that's the letter that the Commission sent setting out the questions and the answers given by my client. It is, you can't look at that evidence in a vacuum and say, well, because you didn't have a right to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana, who gave evidence on an aspect of the Free State asbestos audit, therefore any other evidence outside of that, despite it being related to the Free State asbestos audit, is permitted before you are allowed to cross-examine Mr. Dukwana. That, with respect, is looking at the issues in a vacuum. Whereas, if one looks at the purpose of my client being called today to give evidence, it is clear. It's evidence related to the Free State asbestos audit. Now, simply to say, well, I'm going to ask, for my learned friend to say, I'm going to ask questions.
But
Sorry.
there is no, even on your own approach, there is no application that your client has lodged for leave to cross-examine anybody in regard to any evidence other than Dukwana. So, and from what one can see, and Mr. Prejudice also made the point, your client knows exactly what the issues are in regard to the other evidence that is not Mr. Dukwana's evidence. He has answered questions. He has not said, no, I need more time to answer these questions. He has answered the questions.
No, that's correct. He's cooperated in accordance with his tender. But the point I'm simply making is this. One cannot just divorce that evidence from and ignore all of the evidence that's already been given by Mr. Dukwana and look at the evidence
But if I postpone, for what purpose would I postpone?
The purpose is simply this, that before my client
If we
is
take
called...
out Dukwana,
Sorry.
if we leave Mr. Dukwana out of it,
Yes.
What would be the purpose of postponing?
The purpose is this, Mr. Commissioner. Before my client is called into a very public forum to be asked questions relating to the Free State asbestos audit, he should be given an opportunity to cross-examine the very witness that the Commission relies upon in respect of that particular aspect of the Commission. Mr. Dukwana has been the witness that the Commission has relied on, has been the witness, call it the complainant, so to speak, in respect of this Free State asbestos audit. Now, to simply look at Mr. Dukwana's evidence in isolation is, with respect, inappropriate, because before my client is then asked to get into the witness box in a public forum such as this, where his reputation may be affected, where he may suffer defamation, where he may be asked unnecessary questions, he surely should be given an opportunity to cross-examine the very witness that the Commission is relying upon to continue with this evidence on the Free State asbestos audit. And that really is the point, that you can't separate the evidence. You can't simply look at Mr. Dukwana's evidence in complete isolation to the evidence that is now being sought to be led today by the Commission.
Okay, I'll give you 3 minutes to conclude. Is that
That's
fine?
it. I've got no further.
You have no further
Those are my
submissions.
submissions.
Yes.
I just implore Mr. Commissioner not to look at the evidence completely in
Yes.
isolation
Yes.
to what Mr. Dukwana has already laid as the basis for this
Yes.
commission to proceed to question my client on the Free State asbestos audit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The application brought by Mr. Zulu for the postponement of the hearing of his evidence is dismissed. If reasons are asked for, they will be given. We'll take the tea adjournment now, and it's 28 minutes past 11. We will resume at 11:45. We adjourn.
I'm sending you something quickly to print, okay? Quickly. Man, I'm sending you something to print for me quickly. Something print, I need to do it that quickly. Yeah. Ah, yeah. I say, okay. Namhlanje ikomishini noma eklapha ifunyaje
Kade ngibuza nje izolo indawo ngahamba ngama-calls akho ngithi hayi mkhulu ifoni ngifaka silent yini ungayibhala ngithi hayi le team will be communicated nami la during a hearing yeah iyakhala kusasa easily or
Okay, are we ready to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Thabane Wiseman Zulu is, as it were,
Is the
on the
next
stand.
witness.
May he be sworn in.
Okay, please administer the oath of affirmation. Mr. Zulu, you might wish to either remove your mask or move it a bit, otherwise the transcribers won't hear you. Yes, okay.
Please state your full names for the record.
Thabane Wiseman Zulu.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Correct.
Do you swear that the evidence you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Not a good time for that to happen. My apologies. Morning, Mr. Zulu.
Morning.
Mr. Zulu, you have, in these proceedings, submitted two affidavits.
Correct.
The first affidavit appears at page 159 of the bundle marked Free State 1. You have it in front of you?
Yes.
Just tell him, Mr. Pretorius, that you'll be, when you refer to page numbers, you'll be referring to the black numbers on the
Yes.
left of each page.
Mr. Zulu, if you look at any page in that bundle, you will see in the top left-hand corner, Free State 01 and then a number. Do you see that?
Yes.
And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see numbers in red. Those are for record purposes. You don't have to bother yourself with those numbers.
Okay.
So when I refer to a page number, I will be referring to the number in black in the top left-hand corner of each page. So the first affidavit that you submitted to the Commission...
Hang on, Mr. Pretorius. We are going to be using bundle FS1, is that right?
Correct, FS1. I don't know if your spine has yet been...
I had requested
Amended.
that this be written on the spine so that it wasn't written. So if all others can be written bundle FS whatever, so that one knows that FS1 refers to the bundle.
That instruction has gone out, DCJ.
Okay, all right.
In any event...
So, Mr. Zulu, when either Mr. Pretorius or I refer to bundle FS1, we'll be referring to this bundle, that bundle that is in front of you, and on the spine, you will see FS1. Maybe it's not written bundle, but that is bundle FS1.
Okay.
And if you want to write it on the spine, it's fine as well, but if you will remember, that's okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Zulu, if it's easier for you, you can lower your mask when you speak so that we can all hear.
And also, Mr. Zulu, when you note that won't be captured in the transcript. It's better if you say yes or no. Yeah, okay.
Noted, Chair.
So if we go, Mr. Zulu, to FS1, the bundle in front of you, at page 159, you will see an affidavit. That's your second affidavit, but perhaps I should do it in order.
159, yes.
So let's start, I'm sorry. At page 148, you'll see a cover page.
148. Yes, correct.
You have that. And if you go to page 150 of FS1, you will see an affidavit. You see that? If I may ask you then to identify the signature on page 6, on page 155 rather. Is that your signature?
155. Correct.
That is your signature. Would you speak up, please, Mr. Zulu, and into
Yes,
the
please.
microphone?
Yes, yes.
Do you know the contents of this affidavit?
Correct.
Are they, as far as
And
you are
did
aware?
you confirm
true
that
and
it
correct?
is his signature that appears on page 155? Is that your signature?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. You did say so, but
Yeah,
I
away
don't think
from-
loudly enough for the
Yes.
stenographer to hear.
Okay.
And then if we go to Exhibit TT 5.2 on page 157, please.
Mr. Pretorius, is it not easier that we immediately, you asked me to admit this as a certain exhibit?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I would have done that at the end, but now it's convenient.
Yeah, it's convenient to do it
Would
now.
you, Chair, admit the affidavit which appears in bundle FS1 at page 150 and following as Exhibit TT1?
TT51 or TT1?
Sorry, TT 5.1.
Yeah, 5.1. The affidavit of Mr. Thabane, Wiseman, Zulu, appearing at page 150, and I'm referring to the black number, it will be admitted as Exhibit TT 5.1.
And then if you go, please, in the same bundle, FS1 to page 157, you will see there the cover page of another exhibit, Exhibit TT 5.2. Do you see that? Page 157.
Yes.
And if you go, please, to page 159, you will see the first page of another affidavit. That's Exhibit TT2, together with all its annexures.
Correct.
If you would please identify the signature then at page 159. Sorry, no. Not page 159, my apologies, that's the first page.
And the
At
last page is
173.
173. Yeah.
173.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that your signature there? Above the pon.
That's your signature.
Getting there.
173.
Correct.
Okay.
And as far as you are aware, the contents of this affidavit, are they true and correct?
Correct.
There are a number of annexures to the affidavit which appear in the following pages, and we'll come to those in the course of your evidence. But if I may draw your attention to one of the annexures at page
Are the
204. I'm sorry, Chair.
are the annexures separate from the affidavit to which they are annexures?
No, they follow on, Chair, from the affidavit.
The one that you were dealing with now, the affidavit, starts at page 159 and goes up to page 173.
Yeah.
After that, I don't have annexures. I've got another affidavit by Mr. Zulu.
Yes. That affidavit is in fact his first affidavit, which is annexed to his second affidavit.
Yes, so that affidavit is also an annexure.
Yes.
It's an annexure
It's
to
a
this.
repeat of his first affidavit.
Okay. If it's referred to in the affidavit starting at page 159, if it is referred to as an annexure, I would think that we must leave it as part of Exhibit TT 5.2. But if it is not referred to in the affidavit, it would be a standalone affidavit, even if it might have similarities in terms of content with certain.
Well, in the further affidavit, the one beginning at page 159 of FS1,
yes,
at paragraph 2,
yeah,
he says, on 23 August 2019, I deposed to an affidavit in response to a notice in terms of Rule 3.3 that I received on 5 August 2019. For ease of reference, I attached to marked annexure TWZ 1.1, a copy thereof.
Okay, no,
so it's all there
fine.
with its annexures.
That's fine.
And it has its own annexures
too. Okay.
And I'd like to draw your attention, Chair, to an important document. Amongst those annexures, it appears at page 204 of bundle FS1. If you would go there, please. It's annexure TWZ8 to the affidavit, but we don't refer to that now. We'll just refer to the page number. It's marked with tab 8, Chair.
Yes,
the
yes,
red
I
tab
see it.
8.
Yeah.
That is a copy of a letter sent to you by the Commission on the 14th of May 2020.
At page 204. Are you able to find it? It's a letter from the Commission addressed to you at page 204.
Yes.
You have found it.
Dated 14 May 2020.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now that letter was sent to you, and your answers to the questions are contained in the letter. So this is actually not the letter sent to you, this is your response, because in each paragraph, 2.1 to 2.2, and all the following paragraphs in italics, in a different color font, although it may not be very clear in this light, Chair, are your answers to the questions.
Correct.
And we'll come back to those answers.
Yes, I see you nodded. You mean yes?
Yes, correct. I said
okay,
correct.
all right.
And Mr. Zulu, we have a request. Our stenographer.
No, I said
please,
correct,
if you would speak up.
then I nodded. I
Thank
said
you.
correct, then I nodded.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. All right. I'd like you to refer you. There is a short route and a longer route, and I'd like to ask you to comment on the statements of Mr. Makesi. Do you know Mr. Makesi?
If you can elaborate.
He is the head of department, or was the head of department, Free State Human Settlements,
Correct.
at the time that the events we're talking about occurred.
Yes, I know him.
You know him, all right. Now, he attested to an affidavit, and I just want to ask your comment there on the contents. They're at a general level, and your response would help the Commission with its work, and then we'll, if necessary, after that, go to the original documentation. But if I could ask you to look at page 35 of bundle FS1.
$235.
Page 35.
Page 35.
35, yeah.
35, the black numbering again. We know, and you would have come across this in the questions put to you by the investigators.
Just help me with the page number.
I'm sorry.
Just help me with the page number on the bundle.
Page 35, Free State 1 or FS1, page 35.
It's in the affidavit of Mr. Kgotso.
This is an affidavit of Mr. Manyike, and this is his evidence to the Commission.
Remember to look at the black numbers all the time, or page numbers. Page 35.
The black number starts with...
It says 035, but we just say 35.
Here it starts with 0157.
Yeah, okay. Disregard Free State, disregard 01, disregard the hyphen, disregard the 0.
Yeah.
When we say 35, we just mean the last digits, 2 digits. So we won't be mentioning all the things that come before it. If you look at the red page number at the top, is TT 2.1 NM hyphen 08.
That's the way it was said. I'm there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to place this statement that I'm going to put to you in its context, we know that as part of the asbestos project, service providers, a joint venture comprising Blackhead and Diamond Hill, made a proposal to the Free State Department of Human Settlements. And this is the proposal that is referred to here in the pages that follow, from page FS 135 and following. And what I would like to draw your attention to is that this proposal, for the present, at least according to the evidence of Mr. Manyike, was made at risk. If you look, please, at paragraph 13.3.2 on page 36. It says, they, and that's a reference to the service providers in the asbestos project, undertook to execute the above work or mandate on a risks basis. My understanding of this specific proposition was that they undertook the work subject to approval by National Department of Human Settlements and, of course, approval of a business plan relating to this project. Now, before we deal with that paragraph, at the time that this project was underway, 2014 and 2015, what position did you occupy in government?
Director General, Department of Human Settlements.
Right. You were the Director General of the National Department, is that correct?
Correct.
And beneath the National Department were the respective provincial departments in each province.
Correct.
And the arrangements we're talking about, principally at least, were arrangements between a service provider on the one hand. We know that it emerged as a joint venture, but that is something we can talk about at another stage. And the Free State, we also deal with Gauteng, the Free State Department of Human Settlements. There was the project involved those two parties. Am I correct?
Chair, I'm not sure whether you are referring to the paragraph that talks about business plans, National Department being responsible for that.
No, I'll come to that in a moment. I just want to give some background.
Okay.
Really for context to assist you. And because we haven't placed on record your position at the time, perhaps we should. Your position at the time, as I understand it, was the National Director of Human Settlements.
National Director
General
Correct.
of Human Settlements. Correct.
Well, I don't know about National Director General. I think he was Director General of the Department of Human Settlements at national government, as opposed to provincial. Is that correct, Mr. Zulu?
Correct, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay.
But this business proposal, we know, was made to the provincial department in the Free State. This particular proposal for the asbestos project in the Free State. You know about that?
Yes, Chair.
All right. Now, if we can revert to paragraph 13.3.2, please. They, that is the service providers, undertook to execute the above work or mandate on a risks basis. My understanding of this specific proposition, says Mr. Manyike, was that they undertook the work subject to the approval by the National Department of Human Settlements and, of course, approval of a business plan relating to this subject. Do you agree with that proposition?
I will agree with that proposition insofar as the national business plans that falls under the jurisdiction of the Director General of the Department of Human Settlements. In that context, I will agree with that statement.
Sorry, your voice was very soft. I don't mean to
I thought I was
badger you at all, but could you just repeat that, please?
I'm saying in the context that all projects that are being undertaken by different provincial departments are managed under the Department of National Department. So in that context, including their business plans.
All right.
Yes.
So do I understand you correctly that this statement is a correct statement, provided one understands that all projects of a provincial department fall under the supervision, if we can put it that way, of the national department? Am I correct?
It's a joint responsibility. The supervision is also within the accounting officers at a provincial level.
Yes.
And the national department, because it approves the business plans, also has an oversight over those plans. So it's a dual responsibility.
Yes. So approval of the business plan would be necessary, and that approval would have to be given by the national department before it could properly proceed.
I didn't hear your first words when you started your sentence, Mr. Prejudice. If you can please repeat your first words.
Before any human settlements project can proceed at a provincial level, it requires the approval of a business plan by the National Department of Human Settlements.
Correct.
Right. And if one then goes
If
to...
you want maybe me to elaborate on that, I can, what I mean by that.
Yes, sure.
So every financial year, the National Accounting Officer has a responsibility and duty in terms of the law to approve all business plans prior to budgets being allocated for implementation purposes.
Yeah.
And should there be a deviation or a need to deviate from any process or any project during the implementation of those plans, you will require the approval of the National Department.
Right. And ultimately, that's your approval.
Accounting officer's responsibility, of course, in consultation with other structures.
Yes, and you were the accounting officer at national level, were you?
Correct.
Mr. Zulu, although it's Mr. Prejudice who will be asking you most of the questions, he's asking you so that you can tell me.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So
My apologies, Chair.
Yeah.
It's just that he's asking.
yeah,
as
I
he's
understand.
looking at-
Yeah, but
I'll
it helps
try.
if you look this side when you speak, then
I'll try
I
and
don't
balance.
miss anything.
I'll try
Yeah.
and balance my body language.
I'm not saying don't look at him at all, so
Okay.
you can look at him, but when you answer, try and look this side.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Prejudice.
So to take that one step further, Mr. Zulu, the business plan, as I understand it, and please correct me if I have it wrong, the business plan has the consequence that certain budget allocations are made in terms of that plan. Am I correct?
Just elaborate on that.
Well, let me put it to you this way so you can explain it in your own words. What is the relationship between a business plan and the annual budget of the province?
All business plans that are approved first at a provincial level and then submitted at national level for confirming the availability of the budget are aligned with the existing budgets.
All right. So when a business plan is put to you and approved, there must be an allocation in the provincial budget so that that plan can be carried out. Do I understand you correctly?
Under normal circumstances, that's how it's supposed to be.
Under normal circumstances. But there are circumstances when that doesn't occur, and perhaps we're dealing with them here. If you go to paragraph 19 of that affidavit on page 44, there, Mr. Manyike refers to your involvement in this matter, in the project, in your capacity as Director General National. And what he says is that Mr. Thabane Zulu, and I'm referring to page 44 of FS1 at paragraph 19.1, Mr. Thabane Zulu was then Director General of the National Department of Human Settlements. That's a correct statement, is it?
He just wants you to confirm that that part of the statement is correct.
That I was the Director General of the department.
Yes.
I've already confirmed that earlier from the
Yes.
beginning, Chair. Yes.
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Then he goes on to say, before a provincial department could reprioritize or amend its business plan, it should make a motivation to the DG at national level to effect such reprioritization, which affects its business plan and ultimately its budget. So let me put the following question to you before you deal with that statement, Mr. Zulu. If, as in this case, there was no provision in the budget for the execution of this particular asbestos project, the budget would have to be amended, as it were, to allow funds to be released for the project. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair. The budget that is approved in the beginning of every financial year, it's the first budget approved. Every quarterly session that you'll have as a DG or as an accounting officer with your respective accounting officers of the provincial departments will be to seek the exact implementation of that particular budget, as was budgeted from the beginning. And along the lines, then the budgets can be reviewed, and if necessary, also business plans can also be reviewed, depending on the needs analysis or as circumstances as they may change, as I've indicated earlier on.
Yeah. So it seems that quite literally you and Mr. Manyike agree, but just to clarify, in this case, there was no budgetary provision for the asbestos project for 2014-2015 at the beginning of the year.
Correct.
In order to unlock funds for the execution of the project from the Free State budget, it was necessary to make provision now for expenditure in terms of a revised budget. And that could only be done by the submission of a new business plan to the National Department and its approval. Is that a correct summary?
It's correct, but I would like to give context to that as well,
Please do.
Chairperson.
Yes.
It may not be that there is no budget available at a provincial level. It may be that there is budget, but is not allocated for a specific project that you may want to do. But if you want to review, therefore, your business plan, you'll have to get the national department through its accounting officer to allow that review. So it may not be necessarily that you have to get an additional budget.
I see.
Okay.
It may be, for example, that a particular project has not been implemented timeously for whatever reasons, procurement delays, or any other circumstances, but the budget is there. But if you want to redirect your budget, you are changing your business plan, therefore you need National Accounting Officer to do that.
So that is instructive. Thank you, Mr. Zulu. I'd like to understand it in terms of your answer so that we are clear what the position is. You say that a province may have a budget for a particular year in general terms, and that project then is, or that budget rather, is allocated to a number of projects.
Correct.
In this case, the evidence will be that at the beginning of the financial year, no funds had been allocated to the asbestos project. But you say there is a procedure whereby one can move allocations from one project to another, particularly where money is not required for a particular project. It can go to another project. Is that correct?
It's correct.
But for that to occur, the National Department must approve an amended business plan. Am I correct?
You mean the revised business plan?
The revised business plan, yes.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you.
So, in other words, if a provincial department at the beginning of the year had its budget allocated to projects A, B, C, D, E,
Yes, Chair.
and somewhere in the course of the year, a proposal is made, or there is some project that they think they should also accommodate. But that project would not have been part of the business plan that they had before. They would have to change their business plan to take care, to cover this new project, and seek the approval of the National Department, the approval of the change in the business plan. And then, because they can't redirect funds from other projects to a new project without changing or adjusting their business plan.
Correct.
And once they have adjusted their business plan, then they can move funds from one project to the new project. But for all of that to happen, they need the approval of the National Department.
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
If we could go then to another document. These documents appear in various places, Chair, and I'm going to have to move to bundle FS8.
Yes, okay.
Page
Somebody will give you
181.
the relevant bundle, Mr. Zulu. They'll give you the relevant bundle. Are the bundles behind Mr. Zulu now all marked properly? Okay, so if he looks at behind him, he will be able to see each bundle.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you.
This is a letter addressed to Mr. Manyike.
So where are we on this bundle?
Sorry?
Where are we on this bundle?
Page 181. And take a moment to look at the letter, please.
100?
And 81. FS 8, 181.
You'll just have to repeat the page number for me, Mr. Prejudice.
FS 8, 181.
181. Okay.
I found it, Chair.
This is what appears on the face of it to be a letter signed by yourself in your capacity as Director General of the National Department of Human Settlements. It appears to be dated 13 August 2014, and it's addressed to Mr. Manyike, Department of Human Settlements. Do you recall this letter? It's been discussed with you.
Well, Chair, it's quite an odd letter, but surely
Have a look at it.
it's my signature, so I would make,
That is your
I would make an
signature.
assumption that it's the letter that I wrote at the time.
Yes, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You said that is your signature. Mr. Zulu?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is my signature.
Right. For the moment, we'll come back to it later in another context. But for the moment, if I may refer you to the last paragraph of that letter, or the penultimate paragraph of the letter. It reads, "Kindly be informed that the Free State Department of Human Settlements will be held liable for any financial implications or operations of the service provider." Now, what we're talking about here, as appears from the heading to that letter, this is the appointment of a professional resource team or service provider to a departmental panel relating to human settlements departments and municipalities within specific regional areas, which is a long way of saying the asbestos project, but we needn't go there. I don't want to argue that point for you, but this letter concerns the asbestos project.
Yes, I hope so. It will be nice to know which letter was I responding to, or I will doubt if I just rock up and
Well,
just wrote this letter. Surely I might have been.
if you want to read that letter to understand the context, you can just take.
No, I've read it, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Or you would like
to get
see
a
the
better
letter to which you are
context
responding.
of why I wrote this one.
Okay.
Maybe I was responding to Mr.
Okay.
Mukese's inquiry of something, which I'm saying then it will give a better context for me
Okay.
to talk better on this letter.
Well, if you need to look at any other correspondence in order to answer the question I'm going to put to you, of course, we can try and find
Okay.
that correspondence for you.
Yeah, it
But for
helps.
the moment, and it may be necessary to look at other correspondence, but that's in relation to a different issue.
All right.
For the moment, I just want to ask you to look at the last paragraph. Right? It says, "Kindly be informed that the Free State Department of Human Settlements will be held liable for any financial implications or operations of the service provider." In other words, that the Free State Department has to foot the bill for the project. Then it goes on to say, and this is the part I want to put to you, "If need be, you may have to revise your current business plan accordingly so as to be in line with the National Treasury regulations in order to achieve the objective." That statement, saying that you may have to revise your current business plans accordingly in order to comply with financial provisions or directives, is what we're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. And again, it confirms the point I made earlier, that most probably if the letter that I might have been responding to will give me a better sense of why I had to mention this. But I could have been reminding the accounting officer, which is my responsibility at national, that if you want to make any changes on your business plan, first you must make sure that there is budget allocation for that. But secondly, also to put into the responsibility and accountability for any changes you make, that financially and budget-wise, they remain the sole responsibility of a provincial department.
Yeah. But they need your permission if a business plan is to be revised.
Correct.
All right. Then if we can go to the same bundle at page 188, please. FS 188.
Document is too faint, I can't read it.
How is the lighting there, Mr. Zulu?
It's not too good, but I think it's the document
not good.
itself. It's a very small font and it's faint. I don't know if you wanted to read it for me.
My apologies. I'd like you please to go to...
I just 1 second, Mr. Pretorius. Will somebody speak to somebody? I know I had said in this light should be there, and I know why they put it here, but I wonder whether it's possible to get something. I think this particular witness may be struggling to read some of the documents. I don't know whether it's because of the poor quality of the specific letter. It might be, but in the meantime, if something can be done about lighting for him, that should be explored. Mr. Pretorius, I interrupted you.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Zulu, is the light good enough for you to read?
No. Actually, the problem is not with the light.
It's the quality of the...
itself.
Oh, okay,
It's
all
the
right.
quality of the copy.
Oh, okay, all right. No, at least if it's not the light, that's fine.
Thanks, Chair.
All right. Well, if necessary, we can assist you there. This is a letter of appointment. And it's a letter of appointment of a joint venture addressed by the head of department to the joint venture, dated 1 October 2014. I just want to place that on record so that it is a letter that's important in the series of correspondence and documents to assist you, Mr. Zulu. Then if one goes to the next page, that is bundle FS8, page 189, one will see there a service level agreement. The first page, at least, of a service level agreement.
I'm sorry, what page?
189, Chair.
Oh, the following page. Yeah.
This is a service level agreement which on the face of it, at page 189, was entered into between the Department of Human Settlements, represented by Mr. Ntomotsi Moketsi, in his capacity as head of department, and Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited joint venture, herein represented by Edwin Sodi in his capacity as chief executive officer, the service provider. That is the agreement which gave rise to the execution eventually of the asbestos project. If you would turn then, please, to page 231 of the same bundle, FS8. One will see another email.
Did you say we must move to another bundle?
No, FS8, same bundle, page 231.
Okay.
You have it in front of you?
Yes, yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Zulu, would you just look at the email at the foot of the page? It appears that it was an email addressed from your office, from Thabane Zulu, on Wednesday, 26 November 2014, to HODHS, that is the Head of Department Human Settlements, freestatehumansettlements.gov.za. And the subject matter is revised business plans for the Department of Human Settlements, Free State. It appears then to be an email addressed by you to Mr. Manyike. Do I have it correctly?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair.
Would you like to take a moment to look at it? It's not very long.
No, I've already done that.
Right. It says, Dear HOD, please be informed that one of your items in the revised business plan for human settlements development projects relate to asbestos challenges in the Free State. I therefore would like you to provide my office as to why this item should receive priority as suggested in your revised business plan, preferably before the end of business tomorrow, 27 November 2014. Warm regards, Mr. Thabane Zulu. Do you recall that communication?
This communication is in 2014.
Yes.
So I can
your
only say,
voice.
Chair, I can only say, Chair, because it's not signed by me, so I can only
Yes.
only say that
Yes,
probably, but it's 2014. So
Are you able? Are you saying you are not able to remember sending this email, but you are not necessarily saying you did not send it? You don't have enough context to know whether you sent it. Is that what you're saying?
I could have the context. I'm just saying, so it's 2014.
Sorry?
So I'm just saying it's 2014.
Yes.
So most probably I would have sent such an email
Yes.
based again on what.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when you jump into a
Yes.
correspondence like this, there would have
Yes.
an event that would have happened
Oh,
that will give context to this.
Yeah,
Now I can
okay.
only make assumptions
yes. Yeah.
that most probably
No, I understand what
most
you're saying.
probably there was a revised business plan. I will make that assumption,
Yes.
which needed the attention of the Director General,
Yeah. So you
upon which you needed to
Yeah.
check the
Yeah.
relevance of the revised business plan.
So at this stage, you are only able to say, on the face of it,
Yeah.
it seems like an email I would have
Absolutely.
sent.
Absolutely,
But I
Chair.
can't be more definite than
Yeah,
that.
absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
And it would be consistent, I presume, with the evidence that you've given in some detail, Mr. Zulu, that if there is a need for an amended business plan, that has to be approved by the National Department under your authority as accounting officer. You would have to be properly informed in relation to the reasons or the motivation for the revised business plan.
Correct.
And it would make sense, therefore, and this email is consistent with your evidence, it appears, that your office needs to have full information before it can approve an amended business plan. Am I correct?
Correct. Correct, Chair.
All right. Well, this was answered And we can turn the page to page 232. This is a long document which is sent to you in fact, I don't want to mislead anybody. This is not a long document. It's 4 pages. And in the context of this commission, that's not long at all. But if you would go to page 232, please. This is a document which appears to be addressed to you, Mr. Zulu, as Director General of Department of Human Settlements. And it is apparently, at least on the face of it, at page 235, signed by Mr. Manyike in his capacity as HOD Human Settlements on the 27th of November 2014. That is the day after the letter that appears at page 231, or the email that appears at 231. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it says in the first paragraph, your email of 26 November refers. And then it goes on to motivate the reasons for the asbestos project. And it highlights the fact that the Free State Province has a significant number of pre-1994 houses roofed with asbestos. Majority are in appalling condition, structurally not sound, almost at the point of collapse. It then goes on to deal with the health dangers, the dangers to human health of asbestos, and in essence is a motivation for the introduction of the project relating to asbestos identification and removal. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is.
Right. You go over the page, please, and look at the paragraph 2/3 down the page, or just after halfway. It says, the objective of the project is twofold. First bullet, quantify, audit, and assess the number of houses roofed with asbestos sheets. And second bullet, remove and dispose asbestos to an approved and accredited disposal site. It continues, the rate will be to conduct door-to-door assessment at 850 Rand per house excluding VAT. You see that?
Yes, correct.
It goes on to say, all asbestos will be removed and disposed of as laid out in the Occupational Health and Safety Act and Regulation 85 of 1993. That was the representation that was made to you in this business plan, amended business plan. You wish to comment?
That's what it is, yes.
It was told to you, in other words, a representation was made to you by Mr. Manyike. All asbestos will be removed and disposed of as laid out in the Occupational Health and Safety Act and Regulations 85 of 1993. That's what you were told.
Yes, but that is in terms of the process of doing the project.
Yes, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that is what
That's the
is
overall,
told you the project will involve.
That's the overall objective, Chair.
Yes.
But of course, it's got phases of how you go about doing that.
No,
you don't just wake up and remove asbestos. There's a process.
Yes, of
But
course.
the overall objective is exactly what you're alluding to.
But
Mr.
importantly,
Pretorius.
you're being asked for your approval,
Yes.
and before you give it, you, quite properly I might add, ask for full information as to this project, because you're going to take a very important decision to allow this project and amend the budget provision.
Correct.
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 Or amend the allocations within the budget.
Correct, Chair.
Correct. What you are told continues. It says the above rate includes the following. Now, the rate you're given here is 850 Rand per house, right? The above rate includes the following. First bullet, submitting a works plan to an approved inspection authority of approval. Second bullet, notifying the Department of Labour in writing of our intention to remove and dispose contaminated rubble asbestos. Over the page, at page 235, contract the service of an approved inspection authority for the purpose of air monitoring. Next bullet, supply experienced medically fit staff and supervision for the purpose of removal. Next bullet, the supply of all safety equipment and relevant PPE, which we now know as personal protective equipment. Next bullet, cordon off the area to be stripped and place relevant signage. Next bullet, transport of the asbestos to a registered disposal site. Next bullet, disposal cost of the asbestos. Next bullet, all relevant paperwork pertaining to health and safety legislation. But the point is that what Mr. Mkesi was saying to you in the plan that you requested before you approved what you had to approve, that's the reallocation of funds within the budget to allow the project to take place, you were told that the rate of 850 per house included the lawful disposal, removal and disposal of the asbestos. That's what this communication appears to say to you.
I think Mr. Mkesi will be best placed to give that context.
Yes, you can.
I'm sorry.
I was
Yeah.
saying, Chair, I think the HOD who wrote this is better placed to give a context in terms of the pricing structure of the project.
Yes, but
I
what
cannot
Mr. Pretorius,
assume that.
what Mr. Pretorius is asking is your own understanding of what he was saying, because you were to approve.
Yeah.
He is motivating to you. If there is something you don't understand, you are not going to approve.
Yes, Chair. But
So he's saying, was this your understanding of what he is saying?
what I'm saying, Chair, is that the context of pricing for the project is good. I will assume it had different phases. So I wouldn't say it's all inclusive in terms of the pricing structure. I wouldn't know that. So
Yes.
I'm saying the HOD as the accounting officer is better placed to give context into what this pricing meant.
Yes, but from your side, what was the question of pricing not one of the things that you would want to make sure you understood clearly before you could give your approval?
Yes, Chair, but that will be in the detail of the project itself,
Yes,
if you hear what I'm saying, because
yes,
every project, it's got different phases.
yes,
So that will be in the detail of the project. That's why I'm saying
yes.
the most best placed person is the accounting officer. For me, this was too high level, if I were to put it like
Yes,
that.
Mr.
So I
Pretorius.
wouldn't like to interpret what the
Well,
HOD meant
Mr.
for this.
Pretorius might think differently. Mr. Pretorius?
Well, let's just, as you fairly require some context, you have said to Mr. Mkesi of the Free State, look, you're responsible for the costs in this matter. If you need to amend your business plan to comply with the Treasury requirements, you must tell me. That's correct.
Correct.
You then, it's apparent from this email, on the 26th of November, say to him, listen, I want your motivation.
Correct.
Because you're asking me to do something, I need to understand your motivation.
Correct, Chair.
He gives you the motivation, and in that motivation he tells you, Mr. Zulu, the flat rate of 850 Rand per house includes all these issues set out on page 234 and 235 of FSA. That's what he tells you.
Yes.
He's making to you a representation, and the purpose of that representation and the purpose of this whole document is to convince you to do what you have to do. Correct.
Correct.
So why I'm putting this to you is you were the recipient of this representation.
Correct.
And the representation is not too difficult to understand, Mr. Zulu. It says the rate will be to conduct door-to-door assessment at 850 per house. It then goes on to say the above unit rate, and there's only one unit rate above, includes the following. So clearly what he's telling you, and I'm not sure that it needs much debate or further context, what he's telling you is that for 850 Rand per unit, all this work is going to be done. Correct?
Yes.
Just to make sure that we are all on the same page, I understand your answer when you say yes to that question. You say you are agreeing that what Mr. Mukesi is telling you here is that that rate of 850 Rand per house, excluding VAT, includes all the items which are listed next to the various bullet points on pages 234 and 235. We are on the same page on that.
We're on the
That's
same
what he
page
says,
with the proviso that the person who's best placed to confirm that it's not me.
No.
Is the
Your
writer.
understanding of what he is saying, that's what Mr. Prejudice wants.
My understanding
Your
is that
understanding, when you read this,
yes,
and when you read it now,
yes.
do you have a different understanding from the one that Mr. Prejudice and I have?
No,
Namely-
I don't, Chair, but if he's asking a further question
Yeah.
to say, is this what was meant by Mr. Mukesi, then that's a different question.
Yes, but
at
your
a face
understanding
value,
is the same as ours.
At a face value, yes,
Yeah,
Chair.
that this is what he means.
At a face
If
value,
he
yes.
comes here and says something else,
Yes.
we'll deal with that
Exactly,
then.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and Mr. Zulu, in fairness, we will ask him what he meant. But for the moment, we're interested in what you were told and what you read.
Well, I must just say that on the face of it, I can't see it meaning anything else because it says the above unit rate includes the following. And the only above unit rate that he talks about on that page is 850 Rand per unit. But of course, when he comes, we might not know. He might say, no, you all misunderstand me. This is what I meant, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Zulu, you were
Are we still
given
on
an
the same page?
opportunity. I'm
On the
sorry.
same page?
Leave it there for the moment. You may
Okay.
want to go back to it.
Okay.
Well, he has limited space. Maybe that's the reason why he's asking.
Where am I going? Which one am I at now?
Yes.
If you are moving to another one, he could take it off for the time being and he'll bring it back when he needs it.
Yes, Chair. We're going to have to deal with both, so there will be some toing or froing.
Okay.
But we share the same challenges. This podium is not also the
well,
most convenient, nor is yours.
Even myself, I have limited
as it may,
space.
Chair.
Yeah.
You were given an opportunity by the investigators to deal with this document, and so I just want to refer you
Which
to
document, Chair? Which document are we at?
the document that you've just
Oh,
looked
this
at.
one. Oh, okay.
And it's a document that was presented to you when you were speaking to the investigators.
Let me,
Just repeat which document you are talking about, Mr.
Yes.
Is it the letter for the motivation letter from the Free State
Yes.
HOD?
It's the document which appears at page 232 of Free State 8, or FS 8.
Okay,
That
I
document that we've just discussed.
yes.
I think I think it is in the bundle that you have put
Yes.
further away from you.
All right.
That you've put away. On your
Does he need
right-hand side.
to bring it back, Mr. Prejudice, to answer?
No, he doesn't need it at the moment.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Just to confirm that the document that we've just been talking about, authored by Mr. Mukesi and sent to you, and its contents were put to you in a consultation that you had with the investigator.
Yes, Chair, if I may just,
Yes.
I'm not sure consultation what it means. But in the
You-
context
you had
of consultation,
You had a meeting stroke interview with the investigators?
I've never met with the investigators.
You've never have met
I've only
with them?
submitted an affidavit to the
Yes,
investigators.
okay.
So I've never interacted with any of the investigators up to today.
Yes,
Okay,
you're
okay.
quite correct. This was done in written communication.
Correct. That's why I wanted to get a sense of the
No,
context.
you're
of
absolutely
consultation.
right. My apologies, Mr. Zulu. If you could go to bundle 1, FS1, at page 210.
Yes, I'm there, 210.
And perhaps to assist you, Mr. Zulu, we should deal first with the paragraph here that talks about the communication that preceded that motivation of Mr. Manyike to you. But before we do so, perhaps we better identify the whole document. You recall that annexed to your second affidavit was a series of questions and answers. The
Correct.
questions came from the Commission and the answers came from you.
Correct.
This question and answer document annexed to your second affidavit, the whole of the document that I'm now referring to, it appears in FS1 at page 204.
Yes, I'm there.
You have that. That, on the face of it, is a letter dated 14 May 2020 addressed to Mr. Thabane Zulu on the letterhead of the Commission.
Correct.
And you'll see, for example, in paragraph 2, it says, we have noticed that there are other issues or there are other matters that you should address in your affidavit, which issues are not included there. And in this regard, we request the following information from you. And then several questions are asked.
Correct.
And the answers to those questions were inserted by you or by those representing you in italics, in blue, after each question. Correct?
Correct. Correct.
All right. So that is the context of what I would like to put to you now. If you could go, please, to page 210 of the same document. In fact, perhaps we should take one step prior to that. Page 209. paragraph 2.14. You see that?
Yes, I'm there, thank you.
The question there relates to a document 7. Now I can tell you, we don't need to go there, but I can tell you that document 7 is the email that you sent on the 26th of November. Would you like to comment on this document? Would you like to check that?
Just go to the paragraph on page 209 that you're referring me to.
209, 214. It says, document 7, would you like to comment on this document? Now I'm just saying to you, Mr. Zulu, to save some time, that document is the document at page 231 of Bundle 8.
Okay.
And it becomes apparent in your later answers, so you can trust me on that.
Okay.
Okay? And you asked to comment on that document, and you say, the contents of the email are self-explanatory in that it poses a single and germane question to the head of department of the Free State Human Settlements Department, namely, why its project relating to the asbestos challenges in the Free State should receive the priority suggested in the department's revised business plan. Right?
Yes.
And then, if you go over the page to paragraph 2.15, document 8, would you like to comment on this document? You say, it is the response to my email dated 26 November 2014. It is the response to my email dated 26 November 2014 being document 7. Now that response was put to you in this series of questions, and document 8 is the motivation concerning which you have answered some questions.
Correct.
It's the document that appears in bundle FS8 at 232. It was also given to you as part of the question.
Okay.
Right? And you are asked, as per document 8, what will be the cost of, what the cost will be, as per document 8 you are asked, what will the cost be of the project? And your answer appears here to be 850 Rand per house excluding VAT.
Yes, Chair, as per the motivation submitted.
Yes. In other words, what you are saying to the investigators or the commission is what you were told by Mr. Makesi.
As per that document that we
As
spoke
per that
about
document.
earlier on, yes.
Yes, as per that document.
Exactly. At
I'm
the
sorry
face
I
value of
interrupted
it,
you.
yes, yeah.
Then 2.15.2, as per document 8, what service will they be rendering? And your answer to that is the specific services recorded at pages 3 and 4. So in answer to the question in relation to what services would be rendered in terms of that document, you, quite correctly I might add, refer to the services that we've just spoken about on page 234 and 235 of FS8, or pages 3 and 4 of the document. That's what you say.
Yes, Chair.
Correct.
Mr. Prejudice, I think we are at 1 o'clock. Should we take the lunch adjournment, or do you want to complete something?
No, we can happily take the long adjournment.
Okay. We'll take the lunch break and resume at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.